fellow cyborgs, and welcome to my summer reading wrap-up. So on my channel, I don't do monthly wrap-ups, but I do seasonal wrap-ups, and you are obviously here for the summer one. I may or may not share with you the star rating that I gave to all of the books you are about to see that I read, but if you want more details, down below is a link to my Goodreads account, and you can check out any more specifics there. The books I'm going to share with you are not in order of having been read, but they're kind of grouped into genre fittings. So let's get started. Norwegian Wood, written by Haruki Murakami and translated by J. Rubin. I really liked this. This was my first Murakami. I underlined many a passage in this, and I am definitely excited to get to my next one, which will be Kafka on the Shore. The 100-Year House by Rebecca Makkai. I also really enjoyed this, found it on a whim in a bookstore. You can hear more about that story in my book haul link down below. This is a backwards told generational saga featuring a house. This is the first of two Persephone reads that I managed to read in the summer months. This is Lady Rose and Mrs. Memory by Ruby Ferguson. I really enjoyed this. It rounded out my trip to Scotland ever so loverly, and I look forward to reading more and more Persephone pics. Still Missing by Beth Gutchian is a book written in the 1980s and is kind of like a crime novel, but from the perspective of the parent who has lost a child, rather than primarily being from the investigator's perspective. Umbrian Shadow by Patricia A. McKillop. This is my first McKillop. She is really well known for writing in a dreamlike sort of manner, and that was definitely the case in this, and fortunately for me, I loved that. The Grace Keepers by Kirsty Logan in the lovely UK edition. This was the first Kirsty Logan that I read this year. I have since read her other two, but I'm only going to be talking about one of those in this wrap-up. I super enjoy her as an author, and I look forward to reading everything else that she writes. I read Uprooted by Naomi Novik. This was a fast-paced Polish fairy tale sort of novel. I really enjoyed it, and I look forward to reading more of Naomi Novik's works. I read The Boy with the Cuckoo Clock Heart. This I picked up in Edinburgh. It takes place in Edinburgh a little bit. It's translated from the French, and I really enjoyed it. I finally read Anna Karenina by Leo Tolstoy. Oh my gosh, you guys. It was not as good as I thought. I don't know why it's called Anna Karenina. I think it probably should have been called Konstantin Levin, because that's mostly what this was about. There were long passages of his farming theories, or him not understanding politics, or whatever. So I'm glad that I finally read it, and the mystery of Anna Karenina, the novel, has passed by. A Night In with Audrey Hepburn. I saw this in my local bookstore. Audrey Hepburn is one of my idols. I think she's a lovely human, and I wish that she was my best friend. This was a fun contemporary read. I thought that the author did a good job of representing Audrey Hepburn, at least as far as I would assume that she would act. This series continues with the likes of Marilyn Monroe and such, but I'm not sure if I'm going to be picking those up. Deathless by Kathleen M. Valenti. 6 out of 5 stars. I loved it. You should read it. The Martian by Andy Weir. This was a fun read. It's mostly a survival story on Mars. There were a lot of really funny parts, but apart from that, it wasn't anything special. Heir to the Empire. This is the first Star Wars book that I have read. I really enjoyed it. I thought that the author, Timothy Zahn, really captured the voices and mannerisms of Luke and Leia Skywalker, Han Solo, Chewbacca, C-3PO, the gang from the only 3 movies that count. I am currently in the middle of its sequel, and I'm also really enjoying it. Gemini Cell by Mike Cole. Mike Cole is a human being that I highly respect. I read this. It was a prequel to his Shadow Ops series. It was really interesting. Not my super favorite. Now let's move on to children's fiction. I read Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children. This has gotten a lot of press in the booktube community, but unfortunately, I didn't like it. I found the relationship between Jacob and his love interest to be really problematic, and I thought that the world was trying to squish a lot into a little space, and that the way the photographs influenced the text was really obvious. I read Serafino by Rachel Hartman. This has been touted as a YA for adults to read, and I think that that is a true statement. The romance, there is a romance in there, is not heavy-handed, it doesn't run the plot, and the plot is really fascinating. Wildwood by Colin Malloy. I picked this up because it's beautiful, and Jen Campbell and Mercedes from Mercy's Bookish Musings had talked about it on their channel. I've actually purchased the entire series, but have only read this, even though it had all the good parts to it, all aspects of a story that I normally find really interesting. Something about it didn't hold my attention very well. I'm still going to continue on with this series and hope that it's going to grab my attention a little bit more, but so far it's only 3 stars. Miss Hazeltine's Home for Shy and Fearful Cats by Alicia Potter. This is a lovely, very short cat-related children's picture book that I picked up in Scotland. It's ever so sweet and ever so applicable to my life. Next, nonfiction. I picked up The Republic of Imagination. This was a recommendation from a new friendly acquaintance of mine. It uses literature as the stepping stones to talk about American culture and how it has been evolving. I found it a really thought-provoking book, but not necessarily enjoyable, so 3 stars from me. Next, I picked up You Deserve a Drink by Mamrie Hart, mostly to support my lady face, who I think is hysterical. I thought it was a decent memoir. There were some bits that made me snort in laughter, but apart from that, nothing that special. You're Never Weird on the Internet Almost by Felicia Day. Felicia Day is another one of the people in the world that I admire ever so highly. I listened to the audiobook version of this, which was absolutely splendid. Felicia Day's voice, she narrates it, really lends itself well to communicating the comedy of the scenes in this. I really enjoyed it, and I thought that it was more than just, let me tell you about my life. There are a lot of great messages hidden in here. Next, I read quite a few short story collections this summer. Let me tell you about them. The Bloody Chamber and Other Stories by Angela Carter. When I was learning about fairy tales and children's literature in college, Angela Carter's name kept popping up, and I decided that I didn't like her and her fairy tale retellings were far too dark. I was wrong. Or at least the fairy tale retelling of hers that I had read, which was super short, I can't remember the name of it, was her darkest and creepiest of the entire collection. So it makes sense that that was my original impression of her writing, but Angela Carter writes ever so beautifully. It's practically poetry. Her reinterpretations of fairy tales are dark and quite feminist, but really nice to read. I've recently ordered another book of hers, which I will tell you about in the future because I'm just so excited to pick up more of her work. Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde and Other Stories by Robert Louis Stevenson. This I picked up in Edinburgh, and he is a writer from Edinburgh, and it was just perfect. The stories I found to be quite interesting and gothic. Sometimes the writing style really bogged me down and was hard to understand, but overall I enjoyed it and I'm glad that I read it. A Portable Shelter by Kirsty Logan. This is her most recent release. It is a collection of short stories, but with an overarching narrative that connects them all. I really enjoyed this. I unfortunately didn't give this the 5 stars that I was hoping to, but I did enjoy it more than The Grace Keepers, just not a whole star worth more. My favorite short story in this collection would have to be number 7, The Exact Sound of Grief. That is the story, and when you read it, you'll be like, Amanda, what are you talking about? But trust me, it's metaphorical, but that was the story where I said, Kirsty Logan knows what she's doing. And I also read The Rental Heart and Other Fairy Tales, also by Kirsty Logan. This I read before A Portable Shelter, actually, and I liked these fairy tales well enough to give her new collection a go. Graphic novels! Blue is the Warmest Color. This has been floating around YouTube's. It's an LGBTQ themed story. It's supposed to be really beautifully drawn. I actually didn't gel with the drawings all that much, unfortunately, and I'm glad I didn't purchase it, but I am glad that I read it. The Wicked and the Divine, Volume 1. This also has been around BookTube. A lot of people really don't like it. They thought that the art style is beautiful and amazing, but that the story for them really fell flat. I see the problems that they've probably had with the narrative, but I enjoyed the heckadoodles out of myself and am looking forward to picking up Volume 2 at some point in the future. Lost at Sea. This is the first comic book that I have read by this author. I have yet to pick up the Scott Pilgrim series. I loved this. I thought that what this was trying to do to capture the existential crisis almost and serendipitous friendships that happen at an high school age was really compelling. I connected with it a lot, and I thought the scene where they hunt cats to be frickin' hilarious. I will probably need to own my own copy of this one. The Encyclopedia of Early Earth, also a BookTube recommendation. I thought that this one was just okay. I wasn't super compelled to keep reading. The artwork, though I recognized that it was unique and beautiful, didn't super thrill me, and I saw what the story was trying to do, but I wasn't completely enchanted by it. This One Summer. This was a lovely little volume that captures the heat of going away to a cabin for summer and childhood and that misfit sort of area. I was very much transported into the world that this book was trying to talk about, and I thoroughly enjoyed myself whilst I was there. Jane, the Fox and Me. This was a recommendation from Mercedes. I was really excited to read this because from her description it sounded like An overweight child is dealing with the struggles of her body issues and uses Jane Eyre as kind of like a fictional pick-me-up, and then somehow a fox comes into there. But unfortunately, the female narrator wasn't actually overweight, and so a aspect of childhood that I wanted to connect with her about wasn't there. I was a really overweight child and I really wanted to read a narrative that was about a kid struggling with that, but this was more about a girl struggling with just general body image issues and the ridiculously stupidness of the kids around her. Nimona by Noelle Stevenson. Friendship brought this to me, and friendship it contains. I will link down below my review of this. Super Mutant Magic Academy. This is written by the same author as this one, Summer. I got this from the library. Didn't enjoy it as much. Its overarching storyline is talking about the oddities that happen in high school that have been emphasized by the mutant abilities of the school children in this book, but it's told in these vignettes that sometimes are only a page long, and I found that at the time I really wanted it to be a straight narrative. That's not what I got, and I also thought that a lot of the vignettes were really sad, and I wasn't expecting that. Realistic, but still sad. Saga Volume 4. So good. This one, I think, is the darkest of all of the volumes, in my opinion, so far, at least when it comes to the family dynamics. In the first 3 volumes, it was very much they were going through it together and would always stay together, and I loved that about this, and in this, fissures form. Now on to poetry! A Short History of Crazy Bone by Patrick Friesen. I saw this at my local bookstore, thought the title looked intriguing, and picked it up. Turns out he is a local author, and this was freaking amazing. It is altogether one long poem about Crazy Bone, this woman who is awesome, mystical, and lives on the edges of society, but the way that you read it is single contained poems, just one after another. I super enjoyed this, and I wish more people knew about it. Interlunar by Margaret Atwood. You saw me haul this in one of my recent videos. This was awesome. I'm going to continue reading Margaret Atwood's poetry until I've read every single thing. I recently read Morning in the Burned House. You will hear about it more, but let's just say 5 stars. Life on Mars by Tracy K. Smith. This was so cool. Space, David Bowie themed poems, some poems that touched me so deeply that I cried. 5 stars, 5 stars, 5 stars. I need my own copy, and I need copies of every other poetry collection she has ever created. Hand in Hand, edited by Carol Ann Duffy. This was okay. Some poems I really liked. On my Goodreads review, you can see which ones those were. Since this was a collection of poetry, just like a short story collection, you're gonna love some, you're gonna not love some. The Talking Horse and the Sad Girl and the Village Under the Sea by Mark Haddon. He is most famously known for writing The Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime, or whatever that title actually is. This is his collection of poetry. I liked it, though I think it really peaked at the first poem in the collection, which is always a shame, but I enjoyed myself. The Cat and the Moon and Other Cat Poems. You've heard me talk about this in my Scottish book haul video. I will link it down below. I have really nothing more to say. Cute, cats, poetry, read it. Well, I hope you have enjoyed learning of what I read this summer. It was a pretty fantastic season as far as reading goes. A lot of these things on this list got 4 stars. There were a couple 5 mixed in there as well, and that's really all I can ask for. Please let me know in the comments down below how your summer reading went. Did you find any new favorites? Did you find anything to rant about for 15 minutes at Starbucks with your friend? Let me in on your life a little bit, like a creep, like you know that I am. Thank you for watching and spending this extended time with me, and until next time, find some awesome books, share them with the world, and continue to be lovely.